Good morning and welcome to this edition of Morning Cafe. How hot is a coffee where you are?
I'm yours truly, Stanley Nyaringita. Karibu sana, wonderful Wednesday. This morning, we talk about matters grooming men, how to actually do from head to toe, what you should be doing, how you, take care of each and every single bit as a man.
Interesting.
Yes.
Each and every single bit of yourself.
Oh, yes.
Very interesting conversation for you to look forward to. My name is Fred Ndimuli, and we'll be looking at the headlines. Let's start now. Quick look at the dailies, and the Standard goes with shock, blunder that could set criminals free. That's a big headline on the Standard this morning.
We'll be telling you more about that. Moving on, the Daily Nation, how Ruto broke housing pledge.
Right, that's the Daily Nation. On the Star, Halwale, I did not kill my trusted farmhand. Wow, interesting headline.
Oh, yes. Moving on, Taifa Leo, serikali imezoea kulingana na Azimio. Oh, imeoza. Niwie radhi mtazamaji, imeoza, serikali imeoza, yani kulingana na Azimio.
How Ruto is riding on Uhuru projects. That's a big headline on the People Daily this morning.
Right, and those are the dailies this morning. Let's take a look at what to expect on the roads this morning. I've highlighted one particular road that if you're leaving the house right now and you use Waiyaki Way, you should be avoiding or try to use other means as possible. That is the Waiyaki Way, the yellow strip showing possible traffic jam and a traffic snarl-up. And that traffic snarl-up there eases as you head into there. Right, let's move that. Those are just a number of those particular roads that you should be avoiding. Let's take a look at the weather this morning. It feels about 18 degrees Celsius, and the trend, Fred, has been for this entire week, and even last week was the temperatures are high. Really speaks volumes on the kind of situation that we are in, even as a country. Temperatures as high as 26 degrees Celsius at over 3 p.m. That is what you'd be expecting today. Well, yes, it even as gets in tomorrow, it promises to probably rain on Sunday. Maybe that's what we're going to be getting into February. Kamvua kidogo, maybe ya kufukuza January.
One of these fine days, you should tell us the weather forecast for, you should give us the weather forecast for Busia. Because there's someone who wakes up very early to watch us from Busia. And probably they would benefit from the weather forecast.
Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes.
All right, let's take a look at the highlights now. Of Juakali Market, situated along Landis Road in Nairobi, with firefighters struggling to control the blaze late into Tuesday night.
Authorities in the United States in connection with the killing of his Kenyan girlfriend, Margaret Mbitu, in Massachusetts, arrested in Nairobi.
Mali books quarter-final meeting with hosts Ivory Coast by holding on to beat Burkina Faso at the 2023 Africa Cup of Nations, with South Africa shocking 10-man Morocco to set a quarter-final place against Cape Verde. Finally, now we have all the quarterfinals set up. Interesting matches coming up this weekend, later this week, I think Friday and Saturday, before we know who's proceeding to the semi-finals.
Oh, yes.
Right.
You to tell us when to expect your prophetess, rather your prophecy.
Well, I prophesied about Ivory Coast. We're still in the game, so yes, I restrict myself to that. I don't think I can go beyond that.
Let's take a look at the news diary, what to expect as of today. First off, matters of cervical awareness, cervical cancer awareness, and the Africa AIDS Healthcare, that is AHF Foundation, will today have a cervical cancer awareness walk meant to spread awareness in Nairobi. And away from that, the Principal Secretary for Tourism, John Ololtua, will today attend and grace the Kenya Association of Women in Tourism Conference here in Nairobi. The conference will focus on revolutionizing tourism in Africa and the role women play in the industry. And from that, today is the last day for the participation, rather in participating in the creation of a design for the Team Kenya ceremonial kit for the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. According to the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, the winner will bag 300,000 Kenyan shillings, while first and second runners-up will walk away with 200,000 and 100,000 Kenyan shillings, respectively. So ensure that you gear up for that. And in courts today, as you can see on the screens, former Samburu Governor Moses Lenol Kulal and 31 others are expected to appear before the Milimani Anti-Corruption Court today. They're charged with conspiracy to commit an offense of corruption, among others. Meanwhile, the former Kenya Pipeline CEO, Dr. Shem Odongo, will today be appearing before the Milimani Anti-Corruption Court on charges of conspiracy to defraud. Other key highlights to expect today: the Kenya-US trade partnership, and today is the last of the third round of the Kenya-US investment and trade partnership. And the event, which began on Monday, was officiated by Trade CS Rebecca Miano, and it will be focusing on agriculture, good regulatory practices, as well as the workers' rights and protection. And finally, the Child Safeguarding Association of Kenya, CSAK, will be launched today. This is a whole initiative driven by a collective of organizations committed to creating communities free from child abuse. That is the news diary. Let's take a look at today in history. Today in history, so last year, a day like this, Pope Francis touched down for the first papal visit to the DRC since 1985 and was welcomed by the President Felix Tshisekedi. And in 2021, a day like this, a World Health Organization-led team of experts investigating the origins of COVID-19 visited Wuhan market, the Chinese city of Wuhan, where the new coronavirus was initially detected. That is today in history for you this morning. Let's dive into the papers now.
All right, let's start off. Yes, that very important bumper before we take a look at the dailies. And we start off with the Standard this morning. Shock blunder that could set criminals free. That's a screaming headline on the front page. It is a revelation from the courts. More than 10,000 people charged with robbery in Kenyan courts since July 2018, and another 2,000 robbery convicts could soon be back on our streets, following what a rights lobby says is a fatal blunder that has seen authorities continue arresting, charging, and convicting suspects using a law declared unconstitutional in 2016. This as rapists and murderers seek to pay cash bail for offenses. This is a special report covered extensively on page 6 and 7. And in 2016, they say this is when the judges declared sections of the penal code penalizing robbery with violence as unconstitutional. In 2018, that's a year when robbery with violence and attempted robbery ceased to exist as crimes in the penal code, according to a rights group. Wow. If they actually pursue this, a lot could change. The other news given prominence on the front page is on the bottom strip, and that is about Azimio. And they say that courts our new arena against Ruto. Raila Odinga's opposition coalition, Azimio la Umoja One Kenya, says it will take the fight to President William Ruto's government in court, a change of tack in its protracted challenge of the government. And this is when they held that summit meeting of Azimio la Umoja leaders yesterday. And you can see a photo of those who attended that summit. Mwangi wa Iria, Wycliffe Oparanya, Martha Karua, Eugene Wamalwa, and Jeremiah Kioni. Let's look at more highlights on the front page. Top cop playing hide and seek with the courts. The War Memorial Hospital management failed to reclaim it from the Nakuru County government for the third time yesterday after County Police boss Samuel Ndanyi failed to enforce the third court order. The story is on page 8. In business, salt, soda ash hit in royalties review. Proposed new mining regulations cuts rates for some major minerals such as titanium, while introducing royalties on clinker, salt and soda ash, which were initially exempt. Bei ya chumvi. Yapanda. Once the price of salt goes up, that's the very last thing that adjusts its prices.
Oh, yes.
On the top strip of the front page of the Standard, how high taxes eroded Kenyan spending power. Wow, we can bear witness to that. On the international front, Pakistan's Khan given 10-year jail. And in sports, running at 50 to build classrooms. That story is on page 30.
On the back page, you can skip that and focus on what is inside. Because
okay, page 30, running at 50. They talk about Isaiah Kosgei, a 50-year-old athlete who trains in Iten, and he runs 140 to 150 kilometers every week for charity. But yes, on the back page of the Standard, Faye not carried away by Ivorian's triumph over Teranga Lions. Well, they're still in the quarters, and we'll see how they perform. Well, that's a Standard.
The cheeky smell. Tulimalizana na hii maneno jana. You know, we heal all
until they exit.
Until they fly away out of...
No, they're at home. Once they exit, they'll just go to the stands and watch the rest of the games. If at all they're not in the final. Painful to see Senegal out. On the Daily Nation, on the front page, how Ruto broke housing pledge. And they say matters resistance. Opposition to the levy new bills mounts during public participation. Matters shifting goalposts. In its manifesto, the ruling coalition did not directly signal a levy deducted from workers' salaries to finance housing projects, and also proposed a modest contribution capped at 3,000 Kenya shillings per household each month to fund healthcare. But the state has now imposed monthly punitive levies of 1.5 and 2.7% of gross earning that have sparked public uproar on pages 6 and 7. The story also focused on the Standard, also here on the Daily Nation, has been fresh push against high taxes and cost of living. So during a summit chaired by Raila Odinga, the opposition coalition resolves to explore other measures besides court action to press the government to address grievances like rising taxes, weakening shilling, and confusion in education sector. And they say it's the 2nd of February, ODM rally Nairobi to press Kenya Kwanza to drop harsh policies. Another story there, Koome warning as UDA senators GSC plot in motion. And the CJ Martha Koome vows the independence of the courts is not negotiable, even as the senator lobbies a change to the composition of the Judicial Service Commission to tame the judiciary. Right, the stories are highlighted on the right scroll. On the pull-out magazines of motoring, what makes the school bus more special. And it matters parenting, something, you know, Fred, you can relate quite well, how raising a daughter transforms a man's life. Oh, yes.
How does it, by the way?
It changes everything about you.
In matters agriculture, Nyeri and Kiambu farmers rip big from 2.9 billion Kenyan shillings fund. And the regions are the biggest beneficiaries of the first tranche of the 4 billion shillings coffee cherry advance revolving fund. And another story that we also had in our highlight, man who fled US after woman's murder arrested. Let's flip the back page. More opposition to judiciary services at Huduma centers. And they would say Rift Valley LSK members say the move flies in the face of separation of powers principle. Meanwhile, Madzayo seeks orders to stop quote-unquote convenience fee payment on e-citizen. That is the Senate Minority Leader Stuart Madzayo. At the very top scroll of the back page of Daily Nation, beaten Cameroon drew changing room rift Angolan Federation bans direct contact with players to avoid destruction ahead of semis. Have that on page 34. And they say, the Angolan Federation bans direct contact with players to avoid destruction. So there's a quote here by the Angolan Football Federation statement. They say, so therefore, in order to avoid noise in the locker room and the consequent destruction of the working group, especially the players, promises of offers should henceforth be made institutionally through the FAF's Communication, Marketing, Commercial and Image Department.
That one.
Yes.
Meaning that the players are already receiving offers to
Yes.
play for probably teams in Europe, which is interesting. I think the AFCON is serving its purpose. It is a mining field or a scouting
Yes, a scouting arena, yes.
For footballing scouts. Let's move on and take a look at Taifa Leo. And on Taifa Leo, kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo, serikali imeoza, wasema Azimio. Upinzani wadai serikali inasingizia misukosuko ya kimataifa kwa gharama ya juu ya maisha badala ya sera zake. Na vinara wa muungano wa Azimio la Umoja wa Kenya wamehimiza Wakenya kutonyamaza, huku serikali ya Kenya Kwanza ikiendeleza walichotaja kama maovu yanayowanyima riziki, haki na kuhujumu demokrasia ambayo nchi imekuwa ikifurahia kwa miaka mingi. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa pili. Vidokezo zaidi pale chini kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo. Wadau wapinga ada ya nyumba bungeni. Ukusanyaji maoni kuhusu ushuru wa nyumba wakamilika kwa upinzani mkali kutoka kwa wananchi. Habari yenyewe kwenye ukurasa wa 3. Kwingineko, UDA yaonya Raila kuhusu kulaani rais, pale chini kwenye ukurasa wa mbele. Viongozi pwani wadai Odinga hana majibu kwa shida zinazoathiri eneo hilo. Kwingineko, masuala ya ushoga, Papa asema Waafrika ni special. Aonekana kubatili ushauri wake kwa maaskofu. Habari yenyewe kwenye ukurasa wa 8. Pale juu masuala ya spoti. Ivory Coast yaota ndoto tamu AFCON, wenyeji robo finali baada ya kubandua Senegal mabao 5-4.
Ni ndoto tu, hata Taifa Leo
ndoto wako pale.
Wamedokeza
ndoto ni Wakenya kufikiria wako pale, lakini wako hapa. Kwingineko, Safaricom yavuna Ethiopia wanaotumia M-Pesa Ethiopia juu mara 3 ndani ya miezi 4. Hizo ndizo habari zilizopewa kipaumbele kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo.
Right. Interesting highlights on the People Daily. They have about 4 of them. So the screaming one here is how Ruto is riding Uhuru on Uhuru projects. They say matters double speak after sending to pawn the claims that the Jubilee administration failed to deliver. President is now in crisis. Is now crisscrossing rather. The country is taking credit for development programs initiated by his predecessor. On page 4, they have a photo of the president there, as well as the deputy, flanked by the deputy president Rigathi Gachagua, as well as ICTCS Eliud Owalo, among other government officials. Another story: security guards sent to be given sweeping powers. Okay. Another interesting highlight that was also on the Standard: free violent robbers, say petitioners. On the top scroll there, page 3. And well, this speaks volumes on the impact this will actually have along the streets of not only even Nairobi, but the entire country, and matters home. No smooth ride for women selling property acquired before marriage. A whole family fusion that is the front page of the People Daily.
Let's move on to the Star, and on the front page, Halwale says, I did not kill my trusted farmhand. Kakamega senator says he's not keen on responding to claims from unverified sources. You can go and read that story on page 2 of the Star this morning. There are photos there on the front page, one of President William Ruto with other leaders attending the Italy-Africa Summit, and another photo of Azimio leaders who attended the Azimio Summit yesterday and later addressed the media. So they're saying Azimio resurfaces as Ruto attends Italy-Africa summit in Rome. And the highlights on the front page, on legal loopholes, Ruto's plan to slam brakes on court cases. Elsewhere, pregnant woman murdered and body dumped in Naivasha. And these are sad stories, continued cases of femicide. Elsewhere, Wetangula leads 30 MPs in new push for Luhya unity. And I think they just failed to include that common word. When you're talking about Luhya unity, they always say elusive.
Yes.
And that's the front page of the Star. I think there's only one more highlight on the top strip. Lawyers mourn advocate gunned down by bandits on way to Isiolo. That's the Star this morning.
Let's take a look at Business Daily. Public officers loot 605 million cash shillings in corrupt deals. That is according to Public Service Commission PSC report. And they say, the commission says another 222.7 million cash shillings was stolen. That was stolen was recovered. And most theft reported in state farms agencies. So public servants made away with 605.1 million in the financial year ended June 2023, giving a sneak peek into the billions of shillings siphoned from the exchequer without any prosecution. You can read that on page 2. On the bottom scroll, Matters Manufacturing, Bear Jones GSK in exiting direct distribution of drugs in Kenya. So GSK is basically the GlaxoSmithKline GSK. On the ticker on the right scroll, state to loan quote-unquote hustlers to pay for mandatory health cover, and government plans to issue loans to non-salaried people who will struggle to pay for the compulsory social health insurance, where monthly contributions will be at 2.75% of the gross income. Matters Economy, Ministry orders Cusco audit over illegal SACCO business. Cusco is the Kenya Union of Savings and Credit Cooperatives. And still on that ticker, companies, Sasini cuts 267 jobs on mechanization. Sad news there. On the Life Pullout magazine, at the very top, behind kitchen doors with top personal chefs on page 19. That is the Business Daily this morning. On the back page of Business Daily, they have a quote by Elon Musk. The first step is to establish that something is possible, then probability will occur.
Right. Tuvuke border sasa, tuangazie masuala ya regional. And we start off with Uganda, and on the Daily Monitor, the big headline, government ordered to set private hospital fees. Now the High Court in Kampala has also ordered private hospitals to stop detaining patients whose bills have not been cleared. Decision comes amid reports that medical facilities are charging an arm and a leg for services. Now government in Uganda will set private hospital fees. Very interesting. Another photo down there of NUP supporters now going to court, and an image there of the leader of opposition in parliament, Bwana Senyonyi, and the National Unity Platform lawyer talking to some of the family members of alleged missing party supporters at the High Court in Kampala. Those are the stories on the Daily Monitor. Let's take a look at the other Ugandan paper. And on New Vision, the New Vision talks about land fraud. Lawyers face tough future. That's the front page. Advocates do not provide services in a vacuum, says court. And that's a big headline there. And still on the front page, another image of graduates from Makerere University. Now they're talking about day 2 of Makerere graduation. That's how big this event is. 2 days of graduation. Even the biggest university in Kenya just does it.
One day.
Fine, but at least it has like 2-3 different graduations in 1 year. This is day 2 of Makerere University graduation. An image of graduates.
So they're graduating in 2 days consecutively?
2 consecutive days of graduation. And that's those are the news, those are the headlines in Uganda this morning.
All right. From Kampala to Edere Hadi Kigali in Rwanda, and take a look at the New Times. inside Rwanda's fight against neglected tropical diseases. And yesterday was the Tropical Diseases Day, also marked here in Kenya. So they say previously lack of proper facilities led to the spread of diseases, particularly affecting children. They have that on page 5. I have a photo there of the Minister of Justice, Emmanuel Ugirashebuja. These Rwandese names, you have to pause first and internalize them before you actually say them.
Don't struggle, you might just bite your tongue and you're only starting off the show, you know.
Ugirashebuja, wow. And the EU ambassador to Rwanda, Belen Calvo Yara, during the launch of a program that will enhance accountability in the justice sector. On the right, where government's upcoming alternative dispute resolution center matters. Still on matters development, Rwanda Rio Tinto Minerals sign lithium exploration deal. And finally, the perspective by Rogatera. I believe in 30 years, Rwanda has achieved the work of a century. They have that on page 6. That is Rwanda's paper.
Okay. Tuende kule Tanzania na tuangazie gazeti la Mwananchi. Ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi, habari kuu pale, ngoma bado mbichi. Miswada sheria ya uchaguzi. They're still trying to sort out their electoral commission. Serikali yakubaliana hoja ya katibu wa NEC kutohusika kusaili makamishna. Sakata la wakurugenzi kusimamia uchaguzi bado moto. Kamati ya shauri waondolewe, serikali ya komaa nao. Rushwa viti maalum yatafutiwa mwarobaini. Mwarobaini ni dawa. Na wasomi wanasiasa wakosoa mabadiliko. Masuala ya uteuzi wa makamishna kwa tume ya uchaguzi. Habari kuu pale Tanzania. Habari zingine kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi, Samia awapa wavuvi boti akionya uchomaji nyavu. Hizo ndizo habari zilizopewa kipaumbele kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi Tanzania.
Tanzania leo, uwekezaji wa Samia katika tehama usipime. Ni baadhi ya vidokezo katika gazeti hili. Wasema DIT yamalizia ujenzi maabara ya marobati na chuo Dodoma kuanzisha utalii wa kidijitali. Taarifa sawia na pale Mwananchi atoa boti 160 vizimba 222 vya uwezeshaji Mwanza. This even comes as most parts of Tanzania are affected by floods. And the whole of it. Red eyes still trending in Tanzania. Red eyes yasambaa mikoa 17 nchini. Gazeti ya Tanzania leo. Nika kuna gazeti lingine.
Masuala ya spoti zaidi.
Masuala ya spoti kule kwingine.
Okay,
The Citizen.
We do have The Citizen, and on The Citizen talks about bank profits soaring by 400 billion Tanzanian shillings. And you see, if you juxtapose it with what we saw in the Business Daily yesterday, it was talking about Kenyan banks facing high default rates. But in Tanzania, they're making profit. The banks are making profit, and that's a big headline on the front page. The other headline is why malaria has re-emerged in Zanzibar. And those are the big stories on the front page of The Citizen in Tanzania. Let's come back home and take a look at the cartoons of the dailies.
On page 12 of The Standard, page 17 of The Daily Nation, kama kawaida page 10 of The People Daily.
And we start off with The Daily Nation on page 17. It has a caricature of two gentlemen in yellow shirts building a wall labeled affordable housing, and another lady still in a yellow dress from the same party, trying to throw a rock at them. Or swinging a rock on a sling.
Yeah, a brick for this matter.
A brick.
Yes.
One of those building bricks. Says Wamoshomba and Goliath. So Wamoshomba is the David in this one.
Yes.
And facing the Goliath, which are the two men in yellow shirts. And I think we know who they are.
And they look very worried. On page 12 of The Standard, a lady there donning the green jacket, and also a common Mwananchi with the kitenge written counties. There's a gentleman there holding that pan, big pan written treasury. And the lady says, wait, where are the wings? I want the whole chicken. And the gentleman is wearing a coat written national government. So this one is the treasury. And the chicken is 391 billion Kenyan shillings.
Of course, the COG has been asking for 450 billion shillings as equitable share sent to counties. But this is a budget-making process. And yesterday, the Deputy President held a meeting with the governors, and this is where they disagreed. Well, the national government, through the Treasury, is offering 391 billion shillings. The governors are demanding for 450 billion as the equitable share of revenues to the counties. Hence the disagreement between the two levels of governments.
And finally, on page 10 of People Daily, they talking about matters, the fight against corruption. The Moranchi there running with a wheelbarrow, and on top of it, some coins, gold coins there, and that rat trap. And the rat trap there, the rat that is Kenya, the rat trap is corruption. And the rat says, hey, do you have an idea of how I ended up here? As these are the other countries flying with the economy. They're wondering, why are we being left behind? We should also be running with you.
It's an irony because we blame global forces for our situation, but other countries are doing well. It's only us who appear not to be doing that well. Interesting.
I mean, even Tanzania say
the banks are recording profits. Anyway, Sir Bramwell Bokekedi from Busia, that's the gentleman I was telling you about. He's watching and he says, good morning. Good morning to you, Bwana Bramwell Kedi, watching us from Busia. And thank you for watching Keep It a Morning Cafe. Remember, we'll be having very interesting discussions. Of course, State of the Nation after the break. And later on, men's grooming, that interesting conversation you're telling me about.
Oh, yes, as well as how to, if you are actually interested in matters dreadlocks, and if you actually have dreadlocks, we'll be telling you how you could actually maintain your dreadlocks. So stick around for that conversation. _.
My name is Fred Indemuli. You can be part of this conversation as well on social media, on X at TV47 News, and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. 7 with me, Fred Ndimuli. We now want to get down and take a look at the headlines that matter to you, the Kenyans, and our audiences. And this morning, we're privileged to have in studio Harriet Njoki Mboshe. She's an advocate of the High Court and also the Law Society of Kenya presidential candidate. You're one of the many presidential candidates.
Indeed, I am.
How's the campaigns going?
We are moving along very well. If all goes well, on first, God willing, when you host me, you'll be saying Karibu to the President of the Law Society, and we will be executing the mandate.
We'll be here.
Yes.
And we'll make that announcement.
Amen.
Either way.
Yes.
We're still hoping that other panelists will be joining us as we go along, but a quick look at some of the headlines this morning. How Ruto broke housing pledge. That's a big headline on the Daily Nation. But on the Standard, and I want us to talk about this because it is more legal than political. Shock blunder that could set criminals free. Now, more than 10,000 people charged with robbery in Kenyan courts since July 2018, and another 2,000 robbery convicts could soon be back on our streets following what a rights group says is a fatal blunder that has seen authorities continue arresting, charging, and convicting suspects using a law declared unconstitutional in 2016. This as rapists and murderers seek to pay cash bail for offenses, and it's been extensively covered on pages 6 and 7 of the Standard. Let's start off from there because this is a worrying headline. We may talk about politics from time to time, but when we hear that more than 10,000 people could actually be set free because of probably what we may see as negligence on someone's part, that is something that will definitely worry Kenyans. Now, who is to blame for this? We have the Law Society, we have the judiciary, we have all these arms that should be safeguarding and ensuring that these things don't happen. Why is this happening?
We have, the various institutions, and interestingly enough, we have one setup that seems lately to be failing quite a bit, and that is the NCAJ, which then the national, it's a commission that has, is it a committee on administration of justice? It has the heads of most of these institutions, including the Chief Justice. The President of the Law Society sits there. In his absence, the Vice President sits there. It has the DPP. It has the AG. So this is more or less a committee that then is set out. It is established in the Judicial Service Act, and it's really supposed to help in terms of administration of justice. But we see, in fact, yesterday I was having a conversation with someone who attends those meetings, and I was asking them, what is it that you people discuss when you go there? Because even in the past, 1 week, we've been having problems with respect to the relationship between the judiciary and the executive. We've been having problems with respect to that, just the operations of the judiciary. Now we are having this chaotic problem in terms of our criminal justice system. And you know, when the Chief Justice came in, she launched what is called the STAJ. It's social justice, social transformation agenda on access to justice or something like that. And really, it was expected that it was going to have a great impact and not to create a high level of confusion. Now, when these people sit at NCAJ, all these heads that I've told you about, and that is one of the reasons why I'm vying for the presidency of the Law Society of Kenya, because there seems to be a general confusion about what should happen in the country and what should not happen. And yet, this is a caucus of people who are responsible for the country's safety and security. And even when you look at Article 19 of the Constitution in Ndimuli, the right, for instance, to safety and security is the fundamental rights are guaranteed absolutely. It's not a prerogative of the state to decide whether they're going to give us those rights or not. Now, I'll share, for instance, in the past 1 month, we have lost 2 colleagues. One, and may their souls rest in peace, passed on the other day, a few days ago, Anthony Kabadhi. He was shot. Another one, Timon Koskei, he was also murdered. You see? So the security situation is affecting everybody. It is affecting lawyers, and yet it is something that this committee, where the president of the Law Society sits, where the AG sits, where the Chief Justice sits, should be prioritizing where the executive is represented in many ways. So it's a great disadvantage to the country when you find these caucuses that are very properly funded, and yet they are falling short on their mandate.
Okay. And another headline here on page 7 talks about the Attorney General's error leading to this. And they say it is a blunder by the Office of the Attorney General that might see thousands of suspects and robbery convicts freed. Human rights body argues that the police have been arresting while prosecutors and courts have been respectively been charging and convicting persons using a law that was declared unconstitutional in 2016. This is coming at a time when the courts have been under a lot of criticism about accusations and allegations of corruption. Now, when we see that the same courts have been convicting suspects using a law that was declared unconstitutional, that calls into question the manner in which even the judiciary operates. And one may wonder, maybe some of these accusations against the courts are valid.
Nobody says that our judiciary is 100%, but also the gaps that are, you remember the National Council on Administration of Justice, the one I've just shared with you. That institution, that council, has a role to ensure the sanity and sobriety. You know, some of these things, even by the time they're hitting the headlines, last week you saw advocates were complaining about the issue of Huduma centers now taking over some aspects of the judicial process. And really, it's a question of what is NCAJ doing about it? This is a sitting of peers. In Ndimuli, by the time these issues are coming to the public, they should already have been addressed in that caucus. But before even the launch of certain processes, they should already have been addressed at that particular caucus. The AG sits there. And much as we may want to blame the AG alone, he's not the only stakeholder in administration of justice. So we have, each one of us, the need to, because you see when the courts, they don't, much as of course they have the burden to convict or to deal with the matter on the basis of law, it's also a duty. You see, as an advocate, I'm an officer of the court. So I also bear a certain level of duty towards the court. So I'm also not misleading the court in the presentations that I'm making. So yes, there is the problem that then emanates from the AG's office, because then they are the ones prosecuting, and so there's need for that particular kind of clarity. But there's a general confusion in terms of our access to justice and administration of justice that is also not being facilitated, or is not being assisted by the confusion that is arising from the executive and the judiciary.
And now that you're running for president of the Law Society, if successful, and in the next 1 month, we will know whether or not you're successful. Would you propose to change? Because you would be able to sit in that committee that you mentioned.
The greatest thing that I will actually do immediately, because I saw they have a couple of meetings, I think once in 3 months or something like that. You see, it's even, I was looking at their program, and it looks like a conference as opposed to a conversation of peers. So that as opposed to people just coming to, it should be, when I become the president, God willing, I will ask that it's a conversation among peers as it is supposed to be, that before things are rolled out. You see, also it's a question of some people attend meetings in Ndimuli and they don't participate. Someone comes in, reads a speech, and then leaves the meeting. So you find very important issues are discussed and the person is absent. As the president, my commitment in terms of that is that I will be sitting through the entire meetings of NCAJ, so that if there is a concern, it is caught in good time and it doesn't be, it's not looking like a surprise. I mean, you sit in those meetings, so you should know, you see? I should also be able, and it's a commitment that I'm making, be able to directly contribute to the agenda of the day, so that you're not sitting there and waiting for the agenda to come from the Chief Justice's office. If the lawyers are having a problem with the judiciary, for instance, it should be part of the agenda.
Was this thing flagged? Because apparently it's the civil society that is flagging this. How come the law society has not been able to? Because now we're talking about Katiba Institute seeking the release or acquittal of anyone who was either charged and convicted for robbery with violence and attempted robbery with violence from 2018, following the AG's failure to have the law amended or appeal the judgment. This talks about a flawed or a broken criminal justice system from the top down. Some of these people are represented by lawyers in court.
Well, you see, Ndimuli, when I'm representing a client, I'm representing the particular client.
You're taking advantage of all the loopholes.
Yeah. Nevertheless, there is a duty as an advocate to not mislead the court. That duty exists. As a law society, the need is there for us to deliberately, to be more proactive. And that is the other challenge, and why I'm also buying, is that we need to be more proactive in terms of how we're addressing these things. We need to take back the focal position that the law society used to hold. Now it's taken over by everybody. We have the civil society, and of course it's nice, and the Constitution now even expanded the scope of what we call the locus standi, who can challenge a matter or who can take up a matter to court. The thing is that because of that expansion, anybody can challenge. But it's important, because the law society is a creature of statute, to take its mandate and to be able then to be at the forefront of championing some of these things. When you have a broken justice system, it affects the bread and butter of my colleagues. It affects the bread and butter of the profession. So we must have a system that is working. We must have a system that is effective, you see. So it has a direct impact on the law society.
Yeah, Kenyans are said to be very litigious. We've seen the number of cases even in courts, and what we're seeing is that more and more Kenyans are choosing to approach the court directly, even without the assistance of advocates and lawyers. Case in point, Senator for Busia, Okiya Omtata, and as a litigant, he's been even more successful than members of the legal fraternity. And one may wonder what's happening to the law society. Probably one would expect that the law society would take up some of these issues of public interest directly to the courts. How come this is not happening?
We do quite a bit as advocates in terms of litigation. It's just that, again, you see, as an advocate, part of our training is on professional ethics. And so even as we execute our mandate, we have constraints that are placed upon us by the law. So much so that even, and then really we are not able to be advertising everything that we are doing every day. So in my office, what I do, I'm not, perhaps it's one of those things that when I become the president, I should offer CPD for advocates, you know, training on, you know, just putting yourself out there and people knowing what you're doing. But then for us, there's a very thin line between that, especially when a matter is in court, and just being able to speak about it. So because we are advocates, then there's that particular limitation. But I can assure you, even though it will look like some people who are non-advocates are winning cases, advocates are certainly winning more, way more than those cases. It's just that we don't publicize them.
All right. And now, I'm seeing another headline that is still legal-oriented, and I think it's good that you're in studio today, that we may execute this as well, and it's on page 5 of the Daily Nation. It's one of the highlights on the front page, and this is a CAJ warning. Issues to do with the independence of the judiciary. Chief Justice Martha Koome vows the independence of the courts is not negotiable, even as a senator lobbies a change to composition of the Judicial Service Commission to tame the judiciary, meaning that politicians are still keen to pursue or to change the status quo in as far as the independence of the arms of government is concerned. This is a senator for Kiambu, Karungu Wathangwa, and is proposing to change the composition of the Judicial Service Commission and to expand it. And if I may just look at some of the details. Yes, it is clothed rather as a move to enhance judicial accountability, but the senator is looking to expand the JSC's membership to include additional stakeholders such as religious leaders, representatives from other arms of government, and ordinary mwananchi groupings. And one may wonder what kind of effect such a move would have on the Judicial Service Commission and whether or not the judiciary's independence is at stake.
You know, the JSC, the Judicial Service Commission, is a creature of the Constitution under Article 171 of the Constitution. And even as it's important, Frank, and I always say this morning,
Fred.
Fred, hey, I don't know
It's the
why. This is like the 7th time this year I'm calling you that.
I need to meet this, Frank.
We need to get you an affidavit confirming the name. Anyway, Article 171, establishment of the Judicial Service Commission. The truth is this: whereas it is the senator who is tabling that, we have seen he is just holding brief for the president. And this is nothing less than what we have been seeing, the president's attempt to make sure that there is crippling of all the other arms of government, including now, as you can see, even parliament, you see? And there are various ways that he is attempting to do that. For parliament, for instance, by holding the release of funds. Now for the judiciary trying to interfere with their mandate and their independence. Look, nobody is saying that we don't have a problem with corruption, for instance, in the judiciary or things such as that. But there's a process under Article 168 of the Constitution. There's a process for dealing with the removal of a judicial officer. It is not, so let's not pretend that he is doing it out of the kindness of his heart. He's just holding brief for the executive. But also there's need for us to put the executive on notice once again, as we have, many of us have been doing lately, to remind them that you cannot tamper with independent commissions that have been established in the Constitution.
Let's entertain this thought for a moment and ask the question of what kind of consequence should we expect from such a move to expand the Constitution or the membership of the JSC, if at all it's possible? The membership is guaranteed, prescribed by the Constitution, but yes, it is possible to adjust some of these things, to include more members, religious leaders, other representatives from other arms of government, ordinary mwananchi groupings. What kind of effect would this have?
It will require a constitutional amendment, of course, number one. And, you know, because Kenya is a democracy, should they follow the law, then they can, you know, if as long as they follow the law.
If successful, would it dilute or would it in any way leave the judiciary vulnerable?
Well, it will just increase the number of stakeholders. It would mean, because even right now, we have quite a diverse, and even the government has a representative there. So we have, it wouldn't be the first commission that has additional members of that nature. The problem would be the appointing, the nature of how the people get there. Again, there are commissions where, for instance, we have representatives of the business community or of a certain professional body, even where we have, you know, like the Law Society of Kenya has a representative to the JSC. And we usually hold elections for such representatives. In fact, we'll be holding the same day we're having the ones for the presidency where I am vying, we will also be having for the JSC. So long as then there is corresponding adjustment to the other laws that then provides a mechanism for which those representatives are elected or are appointed there. You know, one thing also these people need to realize is that some of the things that people do is a double-edged sword. So they shouldn't get overly excited about trying to amend the law just to suit their situation at the moment. You will remember the now Kenya Kwanza, back then UDA, was part of the ones, for instance, that were against the BBI. But then when they came to office, one of the first things they're trying to do almost immediately is to introduce the office of the leader of official opposition. They have even most of the things they have been trying to reintroduce have been things that were there in the BBI. And yet, because they were on the other side, they wanted to just kill things for the sake of killing them. So even as they're seeking to do this, they should know that the law can actually be a double-edged sword. So they shouldn't do things just out of the emotions of the day. Okay. It should be about, in the grand scheme of things, how does this law serve the public? So that even if they were to say, we want to amend for purposes of adding certain positions, what value do those positions come to add? I'll give you the example in Ndimuli, and sorry for this. We have, for instance, I co-convene the Political Parties Disputes Tribunal of my branch, Nairobi branch, where I'm the Nairobi representative. And one of the issues that the PPDT usually has also, some of the members there are advocates, others are not advocates. Some of the impacts, and it's the same thing even when you look at the KRA, the Tax Appeals Tribunal, you find there are advocates and then there are non-advocates. There's an impact, because even when it comes to the writing of the judgments, sometimes the people who are advocates end up getting burdened to, guide in the process of guide in the entire process, because it's a legal process, guide in the writing of judgments, guide in, so you end up overwhelming a certain constituency. So even as we are thinking of doing those things, we must do it in a manner that is practical and that actually adds value.
Situations definitely change and circumstances do change as well. And some of these laws, double-edged sword. Yes, Harriet Njoki Mboshe, she's running for LSK president in the coming elections. Time now for a break. We'll be back with a lot more after this. You're watching Morning Cafe. Cafe on TV47 with me, Fred Ndimuli. We want to continue with the discussion this morning. Our other panelists have managed to join us finally, and Mesha Kodede, political commentator, is with us. Good morning, karibu sana.
Morning, Fred.
Also joining the panel, Njuguna Mwangi, a governance expert. Karibu sana. It is a pleasure to host you on TV47.
Asante, asante.
We're also still in studio with Harriet Njoki Mboshe, who's running for LSK president in the coming elections. And just before the break, we were discussing this proposal by Kenya Kwanza, and this is a proposal by Senator Karongo Wadhangwa, who's pushing for an expansion of the membership of the Judicial Service Commission in an attempt to actually control the JSC and the judiciary by extension. And the story is on page 4 of the Daily Nation. It says, inside Kenya Kwanza scheme to tame judiciary amid tug of war, and government could use a recomposition of JSC to have greater say in decisions made by the apex court. Now, this proposal, which is clothed as a move to enhance judicial accountability by the senator, he says it is aimed at fostering wider representation and expertise by expanding the JSC membership to include additional stakeholders such as religious leaders, representatives from other arms of government, and ordinary mwananchi groupings. And we've been having this conversation about the independence of these arms of government. What do you think of this latest move by Kenya Kwanza, Bwana Odede?
Thank you, Fred. First, it is easy to note that Kenya Kwanza has not been easy with the law as it is. Like, they just don't like the way our laws are. If it were them, they would have amended a lot of things. To a common man, let me just bring the perspective of a common man. To what value, I stepped in while Harriet was talking about that, to what value does this add to a common man? Because I think the country have got a lot of things to deal with right now. And if you ask randomly every 10 Kenyans you would meet out there and ask them, do you think there is serious problem with our laws or the representation at the Judicial Service Commission? I'm not sure if any of them will say it's a problem. But timing of things are also a big signal of what people should think, because if this was coming sometimes when there was no problem between the executive and judiciary, we would have no issue, because maybe somebody would think this is something they just thought about enhancing how this three arms of government would work. But this is coming right in the middle of bashing of the judiciary by the president himself and the whole team around him. The danger, the biggest danger is that the executive are working together with the parliamentarians who are supposed to be oversighting them to bash judiciary. So it makes the whole thing murky and even worse. So even if there is something good about that proposal, nobody would see it right now. And it would be difficult to, convince Kenyans that this is out of goodwill, out of good faith. We just want to make the Judicial Service Commission work better. It is known and it is seen as something that is tied to the war between the executive and judiciary, and so judiciary is using parliament to muzzle them and make sure that they get the kind of judgments they want, even if they are against the law. That is what I see here.
Okay. Bwana Njuguna, when you see this kind of actions, one may see like a ganging up of two arms of government against the other, one. So it's 2 versus 1. But many people argue, and experts say that probably some of the problems that the executive is actually experiencing before the judiciary could be as a direct result of failure by parliamentarians to do their job. The same parliamentarians who are now looking for ways to change a few things within the judiciary. And some people may argue that if these parliamentarians did their job properly, then the executive would not be encountering the legal hurdles it is. What is your take on that?
Thank you, Fred. First of all, I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to come and have this discussion. And maybe as I come to your question, allow me maybe to just touch on whatever has just been said by my friend here about the JSC. You know, there has been a lot of talks about issues to do with oversight of different institutions of government. And as we know, with the three arms of government, it is very clear on who is supposed to oversight who. Like the parliament, as you have just put it, their main role should be actually to oversight the executive. But then there has been a lot of challenges or maybe lack of understanding, especially among the public, about this issue of who oversights the judiciary. And I think that has also been experienced because on the side of the politicians, because you know politics have really been used to send some kind of a propaganda that the judiciary is not really oversighted. But as we know, there is that law of the JSC, the Judicial Service Commission, which is somehow supposed to make sure that even those judges who are really maybe are said to be corrupt or not doing as per the law, should be action should be taken against them. The JSC has that power and that mandate to make sure that there is accountability in judiciary. But then when you look at the composition of the JSC as per the Article 171 of the Constitution, you realize that actually a good percentage out of the 11 members, I think about 9 of them are actually people with the background of law. And right from the Chief Justice, who is who leads the JSC, you see even other representations like the Attorney General is there. All these are lawyers. Actually 9 of them, 9 out of 11. And there is also a possibility of having 10 of them being lawyers, because the representation from the Public Service Commission may not necessarily, the Constitution has not suggested that they should not be a lawyer. So it is possible to have over about 9 out of 11 being lawyers. That simply means that we are looking out a lot of expertise, maybe or different views of things from all other fields. And therefore, the judiciary appears to be an institution or an arm of government that is purely for lawyers. Mm-hmm. And I think whatever the Senator for Kiambu is proposing, if we can for a minute try to look at it from a different angle, not necessarily political angle, I would still feel that we need some change in the composition of this Judicial Service Commission, so that at least we can be in a position to get the benefit of the skills and experience of other fields, mm-hmm. not only the law, the people who are in the field of law. So I think somehow in Kenya we also need to at least to be patriotic enough. Sometimes it's not always good that any proposal that comes in, we have to look at it in the spectrum of this arm of government fighting the other. Some of these proposals could be very good because we have a lot of stakeholders who need the services of the judiciary. If we lock every other person and leave it to the lawyers, then I think we'll be missing it out.
It's a very interesting perspective, the fact that the JSC could just be another club of legal minds protecting each other.
You know, in the interesting thing, again, it's important that we are very objective. If you're going to send someone and the duty that you're sending the person to is go and farm, right? You're sending someone to go and farm. You will not, that limits what you'll be sending them with. You won't send them with a vehicle. You won't send them with a Bugatti to go to the farm to harvest, isn't it? Now, the mandate of the Judicial Service Commission is very clear in Article 172. If my colleague will read the article just immediately below the one that establishes the Judicial Service Commission. Part of that mandate is aligning the curriculum of judges, right? is discussing the conditions of judges, is discussing, so everything about the mandate of the Judicial Service Commission is about the judges, the judicial officer, and that's why you see we have the Judicial Service Commission. Separately in the Judicial Service Act, we have the NCAJ that brings all those people that my colleague here is saying should be involved. So there's a place for the people that he's saying should be there in the broader scheme of the justice system. When you're setting up your HR office, there are specific people you will bring on board. That is why in the Judicial Service Commission, the 9 that he's talking about, the AG, the Chief Justice, the representative of the Court of Appeal judges, to one of the High Court, another one of the Magistrates' Courts, a male and a female, then one male and one female from the Law Society of Kenya. But we also have one representative from the Public Service Commission. Why? Because, again, it's also a HR arm. So that when we are looking at the HR issues of the judiciary, then you have that. And then you have 2 other people, 1 man and 1 woman, who are actually appointed by the president upon the approval of the National Assembly. And again, these people, there is an express provision in the Constitution that these persons are not supposed to be advocates, okay? So that then the external component is taken care of. So when you are talking about the function of the JSC, because of the nature, it talks about even receiving complaints on how, you know, when you're talking about Article 168 on the removal of judicial officers, who best to know whether there is a misalignment or a misgiving than those 11 people that we have spoken about. There is a representative from Wanjiko, there's a representative from the AGs, there are 2 representatives from the Supreme Court, one from the Supreme Court being the Chief Justice. So all the cadres of the justice system, and including the internal and external stakeholders. Why? Because that is the purpose for which you are setting up that organ. If it was another purpose, then we'll say, fine, it makes sense. Now, the very purpose he's talking about, that's why we have the National Council on Administration of Justice, separate organ under the JSC Act of 2011. Yes.
Wananjungu, do you want to respond to that?
You see, Madam President, allow me to use that title because I believe you are capable of getting there. I think, yes, I agree with you about the functions of the JSC as per the Article 172. But of course, as you know, friend, you know, these lawyers will always, they are very good in articulating their agendas also on the table. Because if you look at the role of JSC, I don't know why we would be feeling anything to do with getting a new, I mean, extra ideas from other fields.
The question is the JSC the problem in the current situation that we're seeing? Because yes, there were accusations, allegations that they were corrupt judicial officers. No one has made any allegation against the JSC or its membership or its failure to do its job. So one may wonder why now that we want to change the composition of the JSC? Actually,
I wouldn't really say it's only the JSC that need reforms. We need the whole structure of justice system. I think it requires to be relooked at, because if you look at the manner in which you see all these counter accusations from different stakeholders is just because somehow there is some conflict of laws and the interests of some people are also viewed like they are also blocking the justice system. Sometimes, if you look at, let's ask ourselves, if there are some corrupt judges, for example, some corrupt judicial officers, what blocks us from actually accessing or making sure that they are prosecuted? That is not a problem of the JSC, because any officer who is corrupt or is being accused of anything that is unlawful, we expect other institutions to take charge, like the DCI, the EACC, to do their job. So I don't think it's just the JSC that need to be, we need actually to do a radical surgery on all these institutions. Somehow, these institutions are not very independent. In fact, we thought during the last regime, we thought that with the new change of guard, we'll be able to see some changes in these institutions. But I don't see much change. Okay. I would blame ourselves as Kenyans, because we need to speak to power, because if you look at the like EACC and DCI, we still do not see that vibrancy in resolving the issue of like corruption and such. So even as we think of reforming the JSC, because for me the reforms, the extension of members in the JSC, I still feel it is important, but then we do not stop there. We need to check on other institutions and make sure that they are independently operational.
Okay, we heard the CJ.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
I don't really think, from where I sit, that there's a problem with the JSC. And neither do I think there's a problem with judiciary. So how we get to the point where we need radical surgery, I don't know. I think if there is an arm of government that needs radical surgery, like yesterday's Parliament. Parliament needs radical surgery because right now, as we speak, all members of Parliament, both in the National Assembly and Senate, who are elected in parties that are within Kenya Kwanza, think they are executive. And so they don't see the need to oversight the executive at all. So the executive brings agenda, and they all rally behind the executive and push that agenda like theirs. So you wonder, at what time are they actually going to oversight the executive as Parliament? So that one is where I think the problem is. And the biggest problem is now with the president himself, because the president utters some words that leaves you as a common Kenyan wondering if the president can look into the camera in the Muli and tell Kenyans that the other government which left had a budget for judiciary. What does that make me think? That makes me think that when BBI was in court, and he has been the deputy president for 10 good years, it means he did a bigger budget to make BBI go his way. And when we went to the Supreme Court for the elections petition, he outdid the government then with money. So that, because there is no judge who is corrupt and will pick $1 million where there is a position of another 2 million. So if it is true that judges are that corrupt and the judiciary is that corrupt and the other government had budgets for judiciary, then it means every landslide case that was given to him on his favor, he managed to give more money than the other government. So you can then ask the question, we have individuals in this country who are richer than the government as a whole, because that is the only logical conclusion if you tell us the other government. And there is no way I can defend and say the other government did not have a budget when he was deputy president in that government for 10 good years. So I have been an outsider, and the inside person who was number 2 in the ranking tells me as a Kenyan that in that government we had a budget for judiciary. So that makes everything look so bad. In that situation, we expect Parliament to actually come out and now say there are a lot of excesses in this executive and we need to re-engineer things. Okay. Like he has mentioned, right, why did we have these representations in the Judicial Service Commission? So that if there is an issue that the president as an individual has, he has a right to push for his agenda. He was elected and he needs to do things. Why can't he lodge those complaints even through his people representing him in the JSC? Let Kenyans see that the president has 1, 2, 3 issues that has been tabled about Judge 1, 2, 3 on matters corruption. Then we will be able to get it right. But finally, the other person who is failing us, according to me, I'm not a lawyer, but from the perspective of a Kenyan, I think the president of judiciary is failing us big time. Why do I say she's failing us big time? Madam CJ is going to negotiate simply because the president and the parliament, Kenya Kwanza wing, have gone on the sunroof of vehicles and bashed them and accused them of this or that. But now the question, Fred, that remains in the mind of a Kenyan like me, what about people who did not get the verdict they wanted at the High Court and went for appeal? What about people who went to the Supreme Court for appeal after the Court of Appeal? If the president did not get the ruling that favors him and Kenya Kwanza, he bashes and then the CJ comes out and say, let's talk. What about us, other Kenyans, who did not get the ruling we wanted in the High Court and Court of Appeal, and we have actually lodged appeals? Then the CJ needs to call us to Uhuru Park or anywhere else. Let's have a conversation. I went to High Court, I did not get the ruling I want, and now we need to talk, because the same thing has happened with the president. He went to court, he didn't get what he wanted.
We have the CJ responding to that on the Daily Nation, page 5. She says, talks don't mean giving up autonomy. Even as we open ourselves to dialogue, one thing we will not open ourselves to is our decision-making process. That's what the CJ says. But it would appear that now many Kenyans have lost confidence in the houses of legislation, the National Assembly and the Senate, because of their dalliance with the executive. Now, because of the kind of accusations and criticisms leveled against the judiciary, many Kenyans will begin asking questions. Now we're seeing the return of Azimio. Yesterday they held that summit meeting and they talked about, yes, courts are our new arena against Ruto. That's the headline on the front page of the Standard, that they will pursue and probably link up with those people who are already in court to enhance this. But on the Daily Nation, they go further and say that court cases aside, the coalition will be mulling over calling a fresh round of anti-government demonstrations. Are we getting to a point where we're seeing as if the judiciary might just be affected to an extent where we as Kenyans may not be able to seek redress from that argument?
One of the challenges that we are facing even with Parliament, much as they have shocked us and they have embarrassed us, is we are finding the problem that, you see, after all is said and done, money is released through or from the treasury, isn't it, to all these other arms. So we are finding the problem, you know, even the fish rots from the head. The problem is coming from the executive and it's wanting to cannibalize other institutions. So much so that if, for instance, they are unable, you see our members of parliament, for instance, they rely on the money that is given to them or to their offices for them to implement projects on the ground. So one of the ways then that capture is implemented is by depriving them money and giving it to them like drips. You know, when you go to hospital and you're taking drip, you're just given enough, you know. So, and that becomes unfortunate because it is the same method that is then going to be used on every other arm. So that now, for instance, when the CJ says that she's going to have a conversation and then she uses an excuse like looking for funding or something like that, we need to look for a manner of funding that guarantees the judiciary a certain level of autonomy from the executive. If that is one of the things we were considering in terms of legislation, that would make sense. In terms of how do we make an independent, you know, because under, you know, in the Constitution, we have where the provisions on Article 248 on the independent constitutions, and the JSC is one of them. So if we were having conversations around how do we make these institutions more independent, one of them is by building their financial capacity. That would make sense. Because we want the judiciary to be independent, but then they are still relying on security from the executive. They're still relying on funding from the executive. So we are putting, they find themselves in a very awkward situation, and then the Chief Justice doesn't help much. For instance, even this Huduma thing that we have seen recently, because it's being controlled by the government as well. So much as we are saying we need to help the judiciary, they also need to also try and help us be able to help them. Now, even though they had the talks, we saw the hat trick that was delivered last Friday by the judiciary, which shows that we have certain judges who will stand firm and will stand on the rule of law. And those ones today, as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, as a presidential candidate, as a Kenyan, I want to assure those ones who are willing to stand by the law that we know it's hard, but we are urging them to stay strong and to stay firm in protecting the rule of law. It is hard, we understand. When I become president, one of the things I'll be keen on pushing for is that aspect in terms of financing of the judiciary, because we need them to be independent. We need to ask ourselves, even in terms of the security that is provided to the judicial officers, because sometimes they'll tell you, okay, Mboshe, you want me to rule in a certain way. And the moment I finish on my way home, the person who is taking me home and who is given the gun is taking instructions from elsewhere. So, you know, how practical is our expectation?
The police service, which provides that kind of protection, is an independent institution.
How independent? And that's the thing. When you look at Article 248, how independent are our independent commissions?
Okay.
That is the question.
And when you talk about independence of this and the three arms of government, because that's one of the biggest discussions we've had over the last 1 month. Parliament in itself, many people may argue that it has no moral authority to stand and accuse the judiciary of being influenced from elsewhere. They've ceded too much ground to the executive already. But we are seeing that the parliament is acting more as a cheerleader, especially against cheerleader for the executive, especially against the judiciary. What do you think could be the consequence of that when one arm of government whose independence has already been undermined is now working for the undermining of the other arm of government?
You see, friend, in as much as we are really advocating for the independence of institutions, we must also acknowledge that these institutions, they all work. Actually, their main business is just to serve the citizens of Kenya. And as they deliver services to Kenyans, there is that important aspect that we must also talk about, that these institutions, the three of them, in fact 4 of them, because I want us to also include the independent commissions. All of them, they should devise a way of working together so that they can deliver services to the people in the right manner. But now, I do not understand why every time we see the heads of either institutions come together, instead of us celebrating the fact that now our institutions have matured enough and they can now be able to have a seat, to sit down and think of how to structure their relationship in terms of working, that is coming up with a working relationship, we now start seeing that as a way of this institution denying the other independence. I think that is something that we as Kenyans need to now mature and move to the next level, because being the head of the judiciary and another one being the head of the executive and another one being the head of legislature, it does not mean that these 3 people should be enemies. In any case, if we can be having as many discussions, as many dialogues with the 3 institutions, as many as possible, the better for our country. So I don't think it is right to say that just because the Chief Justice has come together with the President to just discuss about maybe the challenges that they are going through as the independent arms of government, that is wrong. It's absolutely a good thing. It's something that will help our country to move to the next level. And I'm very happy with the response of the Chief Justice, that even if we have had a discussion with the President, that does not mean that we have traded our independence to the executive. So this is something that as Kenyans we need to accept as a good way of governing, because if we are not talking to each other, if we are not discussing about the things that are really challenging us, every time we have an issue between the executive and the judiciary, that every time we have to see the the president or the members of the executive on top of vehicles talking about the judiciary. Okay. And the judiciary, because they are not politicians, you'll never see them do that. When they are given an opportunity to come and discuss, I think that is a good thing. At the same time, friend, and I want to maybe correct Madam President here on that issue of the financing and the funding. You know, we cannot say that the parliament is being put in, is actually being ganged by the executive because they are given the funds by the executive. You know very clearly that parliament, National Assembly is very key in budget making. And you know, if they want to deny, in fact, even the president, for him to get his projects go through, he has also to ensure that he convinces the parliament on how, through his foot soldiers, on how he needs certain projects being passed in parliament. So we cannot say that the lack of funding, or a member of parliament, for example, will have to join the worship team of the executive just because you want to have a road done in a particular place. And that way, then I will blame the citizens themselves, because then it means we as Kenyans, we are not able to elect people who are independent-minded. Okay. And that way, we'll always have problems with the parliament, because sometimes we have incompetent people in parliament. Okay. But that does not mean that the executive should sit and just watch as parliament also dictate things. A good president and a smart one, I prefer we be led by a smart president than a president who just sit there and just say yes to everything. He has the president we have currently. It means
defying the rule of law?
No. Actually, what I'm seeing with the current president, the president is actually using very diplomatic ways and means of ensuring that he gets support from different institutions. For example, Parliament, if you look at it very clearly, you realize that there are no those fights that we used to hear, a lot of hurabarus like we used to have during the last regime between Parliament and the executive. Because why? Today, now, the president is able to articulate his issues diplomatically to the members of parliament. Okay. Then, when it comes when he is experiencing challenges with the judiciary, he is again diplomatic enough to call the Chief Justice and have a discussion so that they see a very good relationship, okay, so that they can serve Kenyans.
And I'll be brief because I want us to discuss something else before we end this show.
I don't know why this friend of mine is rumor-mongering on TV. When did President call judiciary for this? It is the Chief Justice who actually called for this meeting. The President was on top of the vehicle bashing the entire judiciary and saying they will now not obey any orders from court. That is actually what prompted Madam CJ to actually come and say, we are willing to talk. So the President has not been diplomatic. When it was time for a finance bill, we didn't see a diplomatic president. I saw a president on top of a vehicle saying, I want to see that member of parliament who will go and say no to this bill. I want to see. Is that diplomatic? Why are we even wasting time rumor-mongering on TV, my friend?
No,
there has never been a diplomatic president in Kenya. Okay. There is a dictator who wants his way or no way.
And I want us to
that is what Kenyans have seen.
I want us to end this debate.
No, as Madam President speaks, allow me to just say something about what you said. Because, you see, we are here to discuss issues as they are. It doesn't matter who called who, but the fact of the matter is, they came together and had a discussion.
Fair enough.
The only difference we have with other regimes is that even these other regimes used to talk, but behind the cameras. But what we have now, and we are seeing today, is a government that is ready to let citizens know what is happening. Okay. Even on the issue of finance bill, we used to have a lot of finance bills every year, but the most transparent one was the one that has been passed by this government.
This debate for us, please.
Yeah, I'll end it and say this. You know, my colleague was talking about budgeting. Budgeting is one process, and then release of funds is another process.
Yes.
So even if the budget has gone through and the money is not released to you because someone wants to capture an institution, then it will certainly be affected. The other day in Demoli, we were discussing the issue of school-going children, and we saw money had not been released to institutions. When I talk to many members of parliaments, they're telling me they want to issue bursaries, but because the money has not been released yet, then they're unable to do anything. When the executive wants to finish you as a member of parliament, they will do so through the question of resource allocation and how the drip system, they give it to you, the money ni kama ngumu. You know, this ngumu that people take, you know, so it's, and you see that's why even the Constitution says these issues, even the rights, and Article 19 is very clear. It's not a prerogative of the executive. So this story of the executive playing God needs to stop, and it's important that we have that conversation, especially because they're in control of money. The money question we need to consider as we're talking about independence of the
enough.
judiciary.
It is a debate that will definitely continue, matters to do with the independence of institutions, arms of government, as well as independent commissions. I want us to look at something else that features on the front page of the Daily Nation as we come to the end of the discussion. How Ruto broke housing pledge, shifting goalposts. In its manifesto, the ruling coalition did not directly signal a levy deducted from workers' salaries to finance housing projects, and also proposed a modest contribution capped at 3,000 shillings per household each month to fund healthcare. But the state has now imposed monthly punitive levies of 1.5 for the housing levy and 2.7 for health. But I want us to, if we may, focus on the housing levy. And question is, could this be the Achilles heel for this administration? We've seen that tweet by the former Vice President, Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, saying if he becomes president, the first thing he will do is to do away with the housing levy. It is what is giving Azimio impetus right now. They're even calling for, they'll hold a rally, ODM at least will hold a rally later this week here in Nairobi. Same thing. And one may wonder, has this administration drove itself into a corner with this housing levy, given the fact that even with the public participation, majority of those people on this particular issue who've gone to give their views are saying they're opposed to this levy. And do you think the administration has driven itself into a corner, especially on this issue of the housing levy?
Fred, let's look at two things which, to me as a Kenyan, are very critical. Number one, we both know in the Constitution, housing is a devolved function to the county government. And even if they were sharing, then the law requires the two houses to have some concurrence on that. We don't know whether that concurrence has been there. Then, if housing is devolved to the county government and it is a function of the county government, then on what basis, legal basis, do the national government now have to tax people on the function that has already been devolved to the county government? That is one big question and a puzzle. Number two, the model itself, without going into all the legal technicalities in it, as a Kenyan, I wake up in the morning and I'm asking myself, you take the public land, which we assume is our land, all of us. Then you tax us, you take money from us to build the house. Then you sell the house to us. How does that even reason with anyone? It is my money, it is my land, and then a house is sold to me. How did Uhuru do the affordable housing? Land donated by government, which means public land, it is our land, to reduce the cost. Then the contractor or the investor puts his money to do the house, and then the house is sold at a subsidized rate because the land has already subsidized better part of the cost that would have been difficult for Kenyans. It worked. The houses that President William Ruto has launched, most of them were actually done by the other regime. The one in Nairobi, the ones in Nakuru were actually done during the other regime, and many others. So why didn't he take any money from us? Because he found a good mechanism of doing this. So right now, the Azimio guys have to actually go out there, because you could say they are using this politically. But the truth is, there are 6 million plus Azimio supporters, according to IEBC in the last election. Should the leaders of Azimio keep quiet and see them get into trouble simply because they do not want to do politics? Everybody wants to just keep quiet because it is now time to work. I think it is not. If the price of sugar is unbearable for Kenyans, even the 6-point-something million Azimio supporters are in that. If the levy is being a burden to Kenyans, even the 6-point-something million Azimio supporters are part of those people who are being, their money are being charged as the levy. So Azimio leaders have all the rights to come out and stand for the people they know are their supporters, if not just looked at it as
politics. Even the Jubilee administration under Uhuru Kenyatta had initially proposed the housing fund, but due to public sentiment, they were forced to backtrack on that, but they still managed to put up some houses. The question is, this administration is so insistent that this will go on, despite general sentiment against the same. Why is it so hard, or why is this administration finding it hard to adjust to what the people feel, or to actually look for alternative ways of still going ahead with the project? The affordable housing project is still a valid project. It is only the levy that people are questioning. So
I think I'm quite happy that at least for this one, on the issue of housing, we somehow agree. We have the same opinion with Odende here, because he also accepts the fact that the housing project and housing agenda is very, very important to our nation. And as he has slightly put it, and you have said it so, friend, even the Jubilee administration did it. Even the Azimio team also had it in their manifesto. And I think the agenda of housing, as much as it's a good thing to our country and to the citizens, I still feel that the manner in which it's being implemented by the current administration, somehow it's so confusing that even people who are as learned as Odende and others cannot understand what is really happening. And I think the problem is actually not the way it is being implemented, but even the information, the way it is being relayed to citizens from the side of the executive, it's wanting. Because right now, if you ask a Kenyan who is giving out these taxes for housing, how and the mechanism by which he or she will be able to get a house, nobody can, very few people can understand this. Maybe another time the PS was trying to explain it, he also had to sweat, because it is quite challenging how they are communicating. So I think what we need to, what I would suggest is that the president also need to, although he is very ambitious, he has very good plans for this nation. He has very good agenda. His manifesto is very nice. He's, and I also see him with, he has the best interest for our nation. But again, it's like he also he's overambitious. He wants to everything done at the same time. And whereas he is trying to push the agenda, except apart from himself who is able to articulate his agenda clearly, his foot soldiers, including the members of parliament drawn from his coalition, Kenya Kwanza, or even the ministers, the CSAs that he has, very few people are able now to articulate these agendas to the people.
Do you see that as a weakness politically for William Ruto, that this could cost him politically? In the
actually, that is a very dangerous situation he is in, because as from what I see, it's like he's the only person who understands exactly what he wants to achieve. Of course, if you listen to the president and you go through the whatever is on papers, you realize that not the newspapers, but whatever has been put in as a policy documents by the government, you'll be able to see the sense in every of these projects, like the housing, the health care, and such. But again, when you go to the public, the way the information is being taken to the public, very few people are able to disseminate that information to the people.
You know why, Ndimuli?
Yes.
Because nobody else is able to articulate an illegality better than the president. So everybody else is unable to articulate. Because you see, unfortunately, when you look at,
the illegality here being?
You see, for instance, the Constitution, Schedule 4. Housing policy is government. Housing is the national government. But in terms of the development and the planning, it's a county government function. So you cannot, as an executive, purport to implement this project alone. Again, you're talking about collection of funds for this project. There's no mechanism for how that collection of funds is to be done. Again, Kenya as a system generally is not a socialist system. So you're saying you want to collect money from specific people and not others and then build. So there's an entire raft of illegality and unconstitutionality in the process in which the money is being collected, in the process in which the projects are being implemented. In fact, some are even concerned that one of the major blunders in this is that it is looking like a rushed, it is looking more or less, and for lack of softer terms to use, like a grand corruption and land grabbing scheme of some sort. Because everything about it is completely outside the law. You know, there's a reason why we have the 2010 Constitution, so that no matter how ambitious you are, you should work within the confines of the law. Okay. Otherwise, when we get to a point where an individual's ambition is what we are going to use to run a country, then the country will be in very big trouble.
The IMF, and I'm referring to the financial standard this week, the IMF issued a very curious warning. Some of these ideas being implemented by Kenya Kwanza have been attributed to the IMF and the World Bank. Yeah. But the IMF said, as a rider, that some of these proposals on especially increasing higher taxes could actually result in social unrest. And that was through an IMF dispatch to Kenya. Yeah. Yet you're seeing that Kenya Kwanza and the president is enjoying a lot of cheerleading towards this direction. Do you think that he needs to relook at this particular issue of housing levy?
Fred, I think first, I don't know how honest and genuine IMF and World Bank has been to African countries, because I would want to see one country IMF and World Bank has advised out of poverty to prosperity and a nation is well catered for. I don't know one. I actually think most of their policies are pro-West more than they are to African countries. So we first had Kenya Kwanza Brigade shouting how IMF was behind this, and they were okay, and they were even saying, even IMF, even the World Bank has given accolades to this proposal that by the time of finance bill and all this. But now IMF has seen that Kenyans are actually not resonating with this thing. They are here. It's not like IMF are away and we are locked somewhere. They are not seeing us. They can see, they can tell how the country is responding to all these things. They now want to remove themselves from this and begin to imagine that it is government. So they are even warning government ahead of time that it will cause social unrest. But for me, the genuinity of IMF, World Bank against African countries, I highly doubt. But Fred, now the big question is, why do we develop houses to create jobs and not because we have the need for houses? If today I go to my village and start asking young people who do not have a job that I want to build a big house here, so I want you guys to get the job. And inside me, I honestly don't know what I want to do with that house. There is no need for that house. I'm just building because I'm creating jobs for young people who are jobless in my community. It doesn't make sense. The only thing and defense we have seen all through is, what about 120,000 young people who are already on the site? 130,000 young people have gotten a job. Can we really, as a country, develop houses just because we are creating jobs, not because there is deficit and need for that housing. I doubt if that is the best way to go about this.
Okay. Final comments. Is it, which one costs will have a bigger political cost for Kenya Kwanza and President William Ruto to go back and relook at the proposal for the housing levy, which has caused so much uproar, or to insist on going ahead and pushing on with the same? As you make your final comments.
Friend, first, you see, the president...
About 2 minutes or so, yeah.
Okay. I'm saying the president has really is in a very interesting situation, because if he stops this issue of housing, and of course all other reforms that he has brought in the healthcare and such, what we expect to see is a president who has failed in implementing his manifesto. And in fact, that he will be judged very harshly come 2027 for having not implemented or executed whatever he had promised Kenyans. On the other hand, if he doesn't listen to the cries of many Kenyans, somehow the opposition will obviously take advantage and run with it. But I think to cure all this is, first of all, to have an honest discussion with his team of advisors, especially on what areas the judiciary or the challenges with the law, where do we have the challenges in terms of legalities and such, so that we do not just have a blanket condemnation that this housing project is wrong. At the same time, he also needs to make sure that his house is in order, especially in terms of communication, so that Kenyans can also understand that whatever he's doing, these projects are also have positive impact on the other side, especially some years down the line. Because, friend, we must have first of all agree that we have a challenge with our country's economy. Look at the wage bill that we are dealing with. Around 1.1 trillion of our budget is a lot of, actually part of huge percentage of our budget is going to finance our revenues. It's going to finance the salaries and such. Yet, when we look at the population, the number of people who are employed by the government, they are barely about 1 million. So you look at this, and you have to understand that we have to devise ways of ensuring that the tax base is widened. If we don't do that, then there will be a challenge. Okay. But again, this government also need to be very sensitive, especially on where they are targeting in terms of taxation, because we cannot, as she has slightly put it, we are not in a social, we actually in a capitalist economy. Okay. We need to see a situation where we don't just overburden a segment of Kenyans when we have so many other people who are running away from taxes, who are even earning more than the salaried people, okay, especially in business. Unfortunately, friend, as I conclude, Kaidre, there is a big challenge, especially on the side of KRA, for example. I have seen they have employed staff who are walking around to the businesses, and they claim they are trying to look at the transactions you've been making, and they are giving you some charges. They are telling you that you have these debts to pay. I think that's a very backward approach, because we need to have citizens being educated about the importance of taxation, importance of paying the taxes, and in fact, guiding them on why they need to pay.
Okay.
But this issue of just walking into businesses and start giving them, telling them that they have arrears, that will not help us. We'll actually have people run away from the taxation.
Harriet, final words as we wrap up.
One of the challenges that the president got himself into was to surround himself with people who are afraid of telling him the truth. That is why, again, number 2, he made the fatal mistake of assuming that he will get away with executing things outside the constitution and outside the law. There's a reason why we have the Law Society of Kenya. There's a reason why we have many advocates in this country. I am vying to be the president of the Law Society of Kenya. And one of the things I'd like to advise the president is, before you get yourself into these projects, it is important to ask for legal opinions on the impact and the legal process of some of these things, so that then you can do the things correctly. We have more than 15,000 advocates in this country. So we have enough legal brains in this country that can advise the government on whether or not the housing levy is constitutional. In the alternative, how do you go about it? So let him stop being an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, because he is not. Let him be the president, share his manifesto and say, this is what I'd like to do. What is the legal process? And we have enough lawyers who can give him that advice. So let him take advantage of that. Let him stop mutilating, abusing, and doing all those other bad things to the Constitution.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mesha Kodede.
Yes, Fred.
30 seconds.
Yes. There is a reason why God himself tells us to come reason together. Let us reason, because he knows he gave us a brain. The president must find people who has a brain who wants to reason together. The problem I have is when people stop reasoning completely because they are supporting the president. I have learned people and very well-educated leaders in this country, and many Kenyans who actually believed things like, we are going to carry millions of Kenya shillings and buy fuel in Saudi Arabia and Arab countries and leave them with Kenya shillings to go and exchange from God knows where. And some people believed that. Let us reason. When the president and his team give us something that is not reasoning, let's sit down and reason and say, Mr. President, this cannot work anywhere. How Kenyans believed in their mind that Kenya shillings will be given to Arabs and take fuel, I don't know. And that is just an example of many other things in the Kenya Constitution.
Thank you so much, Mesha Kodede, political commentator, Njuguna Mwangi, governance expert, and Harriet Njoki Mboshe, an advocate of the High Court, also gunning for the position of president of the Law Society. Our panelists this morning, thank you so much for having time for us here at TV47. Straight to the editorial comment this morning on matters cervical cancer. Now, as we come to the end of the Cervical Cancer Awareness Month this January, it is imperative to shine a spotlight on the persistent challenges surrounding cervical cancer in Kenya. Despite ongoing efforts by health experts to raise awareness about cervical cancer and HPV vaccination, the reality remains grim, with cervical cancer standing as the deadliest cancer among women in Kenya, claiming the lives of more than 3,200 women annually. Now, Kenya took a significant step in the right direction by introducing the HPV vaccine into its routine immunization schedule in 2019, targeting all 10-year-old girls. However, the uptake of the vaccine has fallen below the target, with only 56% of the eligible population receiving the first jab by 2023. Furthermore, a mere 28% had received the crucial second jab as recommended for optimal protection. This suboptimal vaccine uptake can be attributed to various misconceptions held by parents. Shockingly, some parents wrongly believe that the HPV vaccine may encourage promiscuity among young girls. Additionally, unfounded concerns about the safety of the vaccine persist, despite ample evidence supporting its efficacy and safety. It is crucial to address these misconceptions head-on and provide accurate information to dispel fears surrounding the vaccine. It is time to dismantle the barriers hindering vaccine uptake and encourage proactive participation in screening programs, health education campaigns, community outreach programs, and collaboration between healthcare professionals and community leaders, which can play pivotal roles in achieving this goal.